I don't remember hearing the rest of her toast. Just that one line, shiny and cruel and blurted through champagne-slick teeth. To the man who actually holds the power. Thank you, Nathan. The garden went quiet for a split second. You could feel the tension wrinkle through the air like a static charge before the laughter kicked in. Some polite, some confused, and a few, Nathan's, downright smug. I smiled. The kind of smile people mistake for grace. Then I turned, walked back into the house, and didn't hear a single footstep behind me. Not hers. Not anyone's. I'd just been gutted in my own backyard by a woman wearing my name and toasting a man I'd never once trusted. The hallway lights flickered faintly as I stepped into my study. My hands didn't shake. Not even a tremor. I opened the bottom drawer of my antique cherry desk and pulled out the black folder I hadn't touched in years, labeled in my own handwriting, Disclosures. You see, the thing about power is, it's almost never where people think it is. It doesn't shine. It doesn't toast. It doesn't wear expensive suits and pat shoulders at parties. Power waits. Power listens. And when it moves, it doesn't ask permission. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. More than 90% of people listen without subscribing, and that tiny click helps the team keep delivering these stories. Back in the garden, Rachel was basking in whatever sick approval she thought she'd earned. Hair pinned, red dress fitting tighter than usual, wine glass raised as if the night had crowned her something. Queen of logistics, I suppose. I didn't follow up with a speech of my own. That wasn't my job anymore. I was retiring. That's what the party was supposed to be about. 23 years of blood and spreadsheets and missed weekends. The staff had no idea. Not about her affair. Not about what she'd really been doing with Nathan behind conference doors and strategy dinners. But I'd had my suspicions for months. Hell, maybe longer. You start to notice when your wife starts speaking about another man the way she used to speak about your dreams. Nathan, young, loud, overconfident. CEO of our logistics partner for the past 5 years. The type who thinks corporate synergy is a pickup line. He'd been circling Rachel for a while. I gave him enough rope. Apparently, she handed him the knot. I had the receipts. Not the ones you think. No text messages or lipstick on collars. Please. That's amateur hour. No, what I had were forwarded emails. Strategy briefs. Partner projections. Revenue forecasts. Each one, accidentally, sent from her work account to his personal Gmail. Labeled innocently. FYI. Or for context. But context kills when you're married to a man who built the compliance architecture himself. Nathan didn't know I still had majority voting proxy. Rachel didn't know I'd planted a mirror inbox on her account 6 months ago. And nobody knew that the cozy little joint venture between our companies had a clause buried in the merger agreement, Clause 9.3, triggered if anyone from either side was caught leaking material data to the other without board approval. It had only ever been hypothetical, until her voice echoed through the garden. To the man who actually holds the power. They both thought that meant him. By the time she kissed his cheek and sat back down, I'd already logged into my old board contact system. The email I drafted wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Attached was a concise PDF. Summary of violations. Breach of Clause 9.3. Each bullet supported by metadata timestamps, forwarded headers, and document trails. A forensic treat. The recipient? An internal compliance address tied to a private mailing list of the partner firm's board members. One Rachel didn't even know existed. It was created before Nathan had even joined. I didn't hit send. Not yet. I scheduled it. 7:14 a.m. sharp. Monday morning. Why 7:14? It was the time I used to get up for work. I figured it'd be poetic. That night, I went back outside. She laughed like nothing had happened. She squeezed my arm like we were still us. I poured myself a scotch and toasted the man who actually held the power. Me. The party wound down like a drunk uncle, loud, staggering, and full of bad decisions. Most of the guests had left by 10. A few lingered around the fire pit in what I assumed was the early onset of hangovers disguised as bonding. Laughter drifted into the house through the cracked patio door, just loud enough to remind me that I hadn't been part of a single real conversation all night. Not that I wanted to be. I stood in my study, drink untouched, staring out the window with the lights off. They hadn't noticed me. People like Rachel and Nathan never do when they're basking in attention. Their type only scans the room for reflections of themselves. She was still out there, knees crossed toward him, face tilted back in a way she hadn't tilted it for me in years. One hand brushed his jacket lapel, absent-mindedly, playfully, the kind of touch that could be mistaken for casual if you hadn't once been on the receiving end of it. And he, Nathan grinned like a man who'd just bought something on sale. The worst part wasn't that they thought they were clever. It was that they thought I was stupid. I turned from the window, sat at my desk, and opened the laptop I hadn't used in months. The one with the encrypted drive. Not my work laptop, not my personal one. This one was for the files that never got saved to cloud storage. The kind that didn't belong to any official system, but had been compiled for exactly a moment like this. I didn't hesitate. I typed in the 6-digit passphrase, "Not your queen," and the system blinked to life. I created a folder years ago, back when I first started to feel her pulling away. It was labeled "If She Ever." In it were dated PDFs, screenshots of forwarded internal emails, redline edits Rachel had sent to Nathan on strategic presentations, even a voice memo where she joked to him over speakerphone about how ancient Michael still uses spreadsheets like it's 2003. They laughed. I saved it. I began building the message. Recipient, redacted, at thepartnergroup.com, an address that routed directly to the private compliance subcommittee within Nathan's board. It had taken some doing to confirm it still existed. But it did. It was buried in the bylaws, unchanged, untouched, and extremely sensitive to irregularities involving strategic data sharing. I attached 5 key exhibits. Labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Subject line, violation of Joint Partnership Integrity Clause, immediate review recommended. I wrote only one sentence in the body. Per Article 9.3 of the merger agreement, the following data transfers represent a clear breach by personnel of both entities. No accusations, just documentation. Then, I selected Schedule Send. 7:14 a.m. Monday. I stared at the time box for a moment, considered changing it. Then I left it. A smirk curled at the corner of my mouth. Not joy, not satisfaction. Just recognition. The calm before leverage becomes motion. In the corner of the study sat the gift Rachel had wrapped for me 2 days ago, still unopened. A leather-bound journal. On the tag, "For your thoughts in retirement." Funny, because my thoughts tonight weren't fit for any leather binding. I clicked the screen shut and leaned back, listening as her laughter outside grew softer. Or maybe it was me growing quieter. Either way, the power had shifted, and she didn't even know it yet. Let her have her moment under the string lights and catered shrimp. The smirk stayed with me through the night. And for the first time in years, it wasn't because I was pretending. The espresso machine sputtered like it had a grudge. Rachel stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand around a mug, the other scrolling through something on her phone, Instagram or Slack, I don't know, whichever gave her more dopamine. She hummed to herself. Same tune she always used when she thought she'd won something. I was in the living room, reading the paper. Not really reading, just flipping pages to look occupied. I didn't want to miss the moment it happened. 7:14 a.m. Her phone buzzed once, then again. Sharp, persistent. She frowned and stepped away from the counter. Hello. Her voice was still syrupy, fresh off the afterglow of public humiliation served cold on a party platter. Then her face drained. Whoever was on the other end, they weren't wasting time with pleasantries. No, that's not possible. What email? Her voice had already gone up a notch. I turned a page. Deliberate. She walked out of the room, but her voice carried. Wait, what do you mean audit triggers? What do you mean compliance clause violations? Pause. Her silence spoke louder than anything. Then I heard it. He sent what? Screenshots? You've got to be kidding me. She came back into view like a ghost, still clutching the phone like it had just turned radioactive. Her jaw clenched and unclenched, eyes darting across the floor like she could find some version of the truth hiding between the tiles. Nathan may lose the chair, she repeated, almost to herself. Whatever breath she had left was gone. Then she hung up, didn't say goodbye, didn't ask a follow-up question, didn't even blink for a full 5 seconds. She just stared at the cabinets, like they might open and explain everything. I waited. Michael, she finally said, voice thin, uncertain. Did you send something to Nathan's board? I didn't look up right away, just folded the paper neatly, set it on the coffee table, and stood. I thought you said he holds the power, I said, walking past her toward the front door. Seems like the board disagrees. She followed. This isn't funny. You don't know what you've done. I opened the door, let the cool morning air fill the entryway. No, Rachel. I know exactly what I've done. You're the one playing catch-up. And then I walked out onto the porch, just stood there and watched the sun claw its way up past the rooftops. Inside, she stayed frozen in place, still gripping the phone, like it might ring again and reverse everything. But phones don't unsend emails. And a boardroom doesn't care about feelings when a compliance clause gets tripped, especially not one triggered by a sleeping with the partner's wife kind of leak. I'd written that clause myself. Funny how life works. She'd toasted the man she thought held the power. Now that man was fighting for his job. And she wasn't even on the invite list to the war she helped start. She stormed in like a lawyer late to court, wild-eyed, barefoot, clutching her phone like it was Exhibit A. I was at the kitchen counter pouring water into the French press, the way I always did. Calm, predictable, intentional. You're destroying my job, she snapped. Do you even understand the fallout from that email? I didn't answer right away. Let the silence stretch long enough for the hiss of boiling water to fill the space between us. Then I said, without turning, you said Nathan holds the power. Let's see how he handles it. Rachel slapped the kitchen island with an open palm. This is vindictive. You're tanking your own retirement party fallout over some bruised ego? Do you even care what happens to me? I stirred the coffee slowly. For rotations clockwise. You cared what happened to me when you forwarded our market entry plans to your boyfriend. Her face twitched. The hit landed, but she wasn't ready to fall. Not yet. He's not. She stopped, regrouped. This is about control, isn't it? You've always needed to win. Well, guess what, Michael? I don't want to play anymore. She marched toward the hallway, then turned back, chin high like she was bracing to detonate something. I want a divorce. I took 2 steps to the drawer beside the fridge, opened it, and slid a manila envelope across the island toward her. A single pin rested on top. Already filed, I said. She blinked, then laughed. But it wasn't real laughter. It was the kind you use when you've just lost track of the script. You're bluffing. I raised my eyebrows and nodded toward the envelope. Sign it if you want. Or don't. Doesn't really change what's coming. She didn't touch the envelope. She reached for control the only way she knew how. I'll take half the company, she said, quieter now. Calculating. You know how this goes. You never read the papers you signed, did you? I asked. She frowned. Check your employment contract, I said, and sipped my coffee. Section 12.3. She didn't move. It's in your drawer upstairs. Or maybe still in your email. Depends if you archived it. I highlighted it for you. But I guess forwarding documents was more your specialty. Her mouth opened, then shut again. You're bluffing, she said again. But this time there was less conviction. Her eyes were darting. Go on, I said. Read it. And then ask yourself who exactly breached the terms of employment. She turned on her heel and marched upstairs. I didn't follow. I sat down, coffee in hand, and waited. 5 minutes later, the sound of a drawer slamming made the walls vibrate. Then, footsteps. Fast. Barefoot on hardwood. She came back down clutching a printed document, page bent, yellow highlighted line visible even from across the room. Section 12.3. I quoted it for her. Any employee found knowingly transmitting proprietary data or client strategies to third-party partners, especially in violation of NDA protocols, shall be deemed in breach of trust and terminated with forfeiture of severance. She shook her head like that could shake away the ink on the paper. Michael, you wouldn't. I cut her off. You already did. She opened her mouth again, closed it, then whispered, You set me up. No, I replied, standing. You set yourself up. I just took notes. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, contract still clutched like a defibrillator that wouldn't fire. The game wasn't over. But for the first time, she realized she'd been playing with the wrong rulebook. She tore through the file cabinet like it had personally betrayed her. Folders flew. Labeled tabs were yanked, half-ripped, dropped. I could hear it all from downstairs. Every desperate shuffle of paper. Every groan of a metal drawer refusing to give up the one truth she had never bothered to care about, the fine print. And then, silence. A long, thick pause where even the birds outside seemed to hush. She had found it. Her employment contract. Signed the week she negotiated her new hybrid role, liaison between our firm and Nathan's. The role she insisted made her feel valued, independent, in control of her own path. I let her have the title. I let her write her own script. What she didn't realize was, I had written the stage directions. When she came back downstairs, her expression was a war zone. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me, like if she stared hard enough, she could find a version of the past that didn't lead here. Her voice was flat. Clause 12.3. I nodded. That's the one. She dropped the contract on the kitchen table like it was evidence in a trial she was trying to win with disbelief alone. Her hand hovered over the highlighted line, but she couldn't quite bring herself to read it aloud. I did it for her. Any employee found leaking internal plans to competing entities or partners will be considered in breach and subject to immediate dismissal without severance. She flinched at without severance, as if that were the part that stung. I didn't leak anything, she said. They were just talking points. Preliminary stuff. Nothing finalized. Rachel, I said calmly, you forwarded Q3 forecasts to a partner firm. With annotations. From your company email. With timestamps. That wasn't confidential, she shot back. It was internal alignment. Contextual alignment, whatever the term is. You sent a document marked Internal Strategic Memo. Do not distribute to your lover. That's not alignment. That's evidence. She recoiled like I'd slapped her. I wasn't. It wasn't like that. I opened my laptop and slid it toward her. On the screen, a PDF titled Breach Documentation, Employee R. Grayson. 37 pages. Indexed. Timestamped. All tied to her employee ID. I filed it last night, I said. Quietly. Through the proper channel. You're entitled to review it before the board sees it in full. I'd advise doing that quickly. She clicked. She scrolled. Page after page. One email titled, FYI, Nathan wanted this. Another, reworking projections per Nathan's suggestions. One with a comment. Michael still thinks we're going with the Houston expansion. LOL. She stopped there. Her hands trembled. She tried to shut the laptop, but fumbled. You were spying on me? No, I said. I was verifying my suspicions. There's a difference. But, I didn't think. That, I said, is exactly the problem. She sat down hard, as if her body had given out. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just stared at the last document she'd opened. A shared doc she and Nathan had edited together. Strategy notes with embedded comments. Hers read, keep this off the official agenda for now. I spoke without venom. You thought it was flirtation. Maybe it was. But it also looks a hell of a lot like corporate espionage when your name's on it, and the company loses a deal because of it. No one lost a deal, she snapped, but her voice cracked. Yet, I said. Her jaw clenched. You want to save your job? I asked. She looked up. Too late, I answered. They're already scheduling a review. And Nathan? He won't burn for you. He'll throw you into the fire to save his own seat. She looked back at the screen. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the moment her little game went from suggestive glances and whispered meetings to code violations and breach of trust. And this time, there was no soft landing. The phone rang once. She didn't answer. The second ring. She grabbed it like a lifeline, thumbs swiping with frantic speed. Nathan's name lit up the screen. She pressed it to her ear and tried to sound composed. Nathan. No greeting. No charm. Just his voice, low and clipped. They're holding an emergency session. Full board. Rachel stood frozen by the sink. Her knuckles whitened around the edge of the counter. What? Why? What are you talking about? Compliance flagged your emails, he said, flat as a ledger. The timestamps, the forwarding addresses. Legal's already looped in. Investors started calling an hour ago. They want to know what exactly you had access to, what you might have sent. Rachel's lips parted. Nothing came out. Nathan kept going. They're combing through Slack archives, calendar logs, everything. I'm getting hammered from every angle. I didn't send anything critical, she said, voice rising. You know that. It was just contextual notes. Stuff we were already aligned on. You told me to. Rachel, he interrupted, sharp now stop. Just stop. Silence. They're treating it like a breach. A coordinated leak between partners. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter right now, Nathan said. Perception does. I can explain. You can't explain this, he snapped. They're drafting statements. If we're lucky, this gets buried under mutual restructuring. But if it escalates, if they trace certain losses to decisions influenced by your memos, then it's on record. And you're not just fired. You're exposed. She tried to breathe, but it came out in stutters. I didn't know Michael had access to any of that. I didn't know he'd send it. You didn't know a lot of things, he said coldly. You played the wrong hand. There was a long pause. A sound like papers shifting on his end. Or maybe he was packing. Are they going to fire me? She whispered. I don't know, he said. I might not even be able to protect myself. Her mouth opened. He was already gone. The call ended with a click. Rachel stood in the kitchen like a statue, phone dangling from her hand. She turned to look at me. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The look in her eyes said it all. The man she thought would save her was busy saving himself. Whatever fantasies she'd built, the secret texts, the office glances, the after-hours phone calls, none of it mattered now. Not in a boardroom. Not to compliance. Not to Nathan. He wasn't going down with her. He was cutting her loose before the splash even hit his shoes. She slumped into the nearest chair. Breath shallow. Eyes wide. Betrayal sinking in from both directions now. I took a sip of coffee. Rough morning. I asked. She didn't respond, just stared down at her phone, waiting for another call that wouldn't come. The house was quiet, but this time, it was her silence that echoed. She didn't even bother with makeup that morning, just threw on a blazer over yesterday's blouse, tied her hair into a rushed knot, and drove like her reputation was in the back seat, choking on exhaust fumes. The car ride was silent. No music, no calls, no news. Just the rhythmic pulse of her own anxiety bouncing off the windshield. At every red light, she checked her phone, waiting for a message that might undo it all. Nothing. Nathan hadn't called back. The board hadn't reached out. The silence wasn't comfort. It was strategy. When she pulled into the company lot, she saw them. Clusters of employees standing near the front entrance, talking in whispers. A few looked up as her car rolled by. None waved. She grabbed her purse and ID badge, walked briskly across the pavement like momentum could shield her. She reached the security door. Swiped. Red light. She tried again. Red. Then again. Still red. A familiar security guard emerged from the lobby, Curtis. His face was grim. "Morning, Ms. Grayson," he said, voice too formal. "I've been asked to escort you upstairs." She blinked. "Curtis, what the hell's going on?" "I'm just following protocol." He didn't offer a smile. He didn't make eye contact. They walked in silence through the lobby, past people she'd worked with for years. Not one of them met her eyes. It was like she'd been erased mid-sentence. Upstairs, HR was waiting. A woman in a gray pantsuit, Melissa, head of people ops, stood outside Rachel's office holding a sealed manila envelope. "Rachel," she said, not unkindly. "We need to speak briefly." "What is this?" Melissa extended the envelope. "Your employment is suspended, effective immediately, pending internal investigation into data handling and confidentiality practices. You may retain counsel, of course. All digital access has been temporarily revoked. You'll be escorted to collect personal items only." Rachel didn't take the envelope right away. Her hand stayed by her sides like accepting it would turn everything real. "This is insane," she murmured. "I didn't do anything criminal. I was trying to." "I'm not the one investigating," Melissa said. "This isn't a judgment. It's procedure." Rachel took the envelope, fingers trembling. Curtis opened her office door. Inside, it looked wrong. Sterile. Already too clean. Her desktop monitor was black. Cables unplugged. Her inbox was gone from the shared calendar. Her nameplate removed. On the corner of her desk sat a cardboard box. Neat. Ready. Someone had packed it for her. Inside were a few notebooks, a mug from a past team retreat, and one photo frame. The frame. It held a picture from 8 years ago. She and Michael at the company retreat in Aspen, before things had frayed. Before Nathan. She was in a red coat, laughing mid-turn, snow on her shoulders. He had his arm around her waist. The smile on his face wasn't fake. She stared at it for a long time, then flipped it face down. Melissa cleared her throat. Curtis stood by the door, silent. Rachel shoved the photo into the box and closed the lid. "Do I need to sign something?" she asked. "Legal will follow up with next steps," Melissa said. "You'll be contacted this week." Rachel nodded, almost dazed, and walked out carrying her life reduced to a brown box and a sealed envelope. As she exited the building, someone held the door for her without looking. Her name was already vanishing from the system. And now, it was vanishing from their mouths too. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same glass walls. Same framed poster about synergy someone approved a decade ago and never thought to replace. Same chairs, 12 of them, surrounding the long walnut table like sentinels pretending they weren't already picking sides. But today, 2 of those chairs were conspicuously empty. Nathan's and Rachel's. Michael walked in with his blazer slung casually over one arm, nodding to the receptionist who'd worked there since the merger. She greeted him with a tight smile, the kind you give someone when you don't know whether to say welcome back or sorry for your loss. The chairman stood as he entered, Wendell, old school, sharp as ever, with a Rolex that whispered rather than shouted. "Michael," he said, offering a hand. "Thank you for coming in." Michael shook it without ceremony. "Appreciate you clearing time." Several other board members looked up from their documents, murmured greetings. A few gave awkward nods, unsure if he was a guest, a whistleblower, or the beginning of their company's next quarterly disaster. He didn't bother sitting just yet. Instead, he placed a single sheet of paper at the head of the table. "Clause 9, he said, his voice calm, almost relaxed, "of the joint venture agreement. Shall we review?" Wendell signaled to the firm's in-house counsel, a woman in her 40s with wireframe glasses and a folder thick enough to choke an intern. She opened it and read aloud. Clause 9.1 through 9.5. In the event of a material breach of confidentiality involving personnel from either party, resulting in loss of trust, reputational harm, or data compromise, the agreement between both entities shall trigger a dissolution review. A board vote will then determine if continuation remains in the mutual interest of both parties. Silence. Michael pulled out a chair and finally Saturday. You've all seen the file I submitted. 37 exhibits. All tied to internal strategy documents. All forwarded by one Rachel Grayson, employee of this firm, spouse of myself, and direct liaison to Nathan Delroy, whose own calendar logs and edits appear on at least 7 of those documents. Unauthorized. Unmonitored. Wendell looked around the table. One board member was already making notes. Another was whispering something to legal. Someone cleared their throat. Mr. Delroy hasn't responded to our request to appear. Michael didn't blink. I'm not surprised. He's had a busy week. The lawyer continued reading. Clause 9.6. In cases where the violation of trust is found to involve senior leadership or partners, the dissolution vote must be held within 5 business days, and all contracts under joint terms will be placed on temporary hold until such a vote is cast. She closed the folder. Michael leaned back, folding his hands. What you decide today is up to you, he said. But the clause is clear. What began as strategic cooperation has now eroded into shared liability. And I believe your investors are already asking questions about how much of your Q2 roadmap was shaped by compromised intel. Wendell sighed, not with frustration, with understanding. I'll call the vote, he said. Michael stood, buttoning his jacket. One last thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive, placing it gently on the table. That contains a copy of all correspondence between Rachel and Nathan over the last 8 months, including voice memos. You'll want to hear them before you decide whether this ends in a statement or a subpoena. He didn't wait for their reactions. He walked to the glass doors and paused just before exiting. Behind him, the sound of folders opening, keyboards clacking, and voices rising in quiet urgency filled the space. The boardroom was no longer a place of discussion. It had become a trigger site, and the bomb had already gone off. By Friday morning, the silence was no longer an absence. It was policy. No calls, no updates, no follow-up from HR, no pleading from Nathan, no lawyer letters offering alternatives. Just a strange, sterilized quiet. Like someone had scrubbed her name off every document, whitewashed every wall she'd ever stood beside, and vacuum-sealed the memory of her career into a file marked "Do Not Restore." Rachel sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and her coffee cold. She hadn't left the house since Tuesday. She didn't want to see anyone, and more importantly, no one wanted to see her. The first thing she saw when she refreshed her inbox was the press release, forwarded to her by some automated PR monitor she'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. Subject: Joint venture ends between Maritech Solutions and Grayson Freight Group. The language was clean, clinical. After 5 years of strategic collaboration, both firms have agreed to dissolve their partnership effective immediately. The decision follows a comprehensive internal review of compliance structures and data integrity processes. Nathan Delroy will be stepping down from his position as CEO, citing personal reasons. A new compliance oversight committee is being formed to strengthen future safeguards. Rachel read it twice. Her name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not as the liaison. Not as a senior contributor. Not as a casualty. She'd been wiped like a smudge on a polished surface. She hit refresh again. That's when the second email came in. No subject. No signature. Just a corporate address. legal@maritechcompliance.org. She clicked it. Per your contract and active NDA violations, your severance package has been formally revoked. Pursuant to sections 12.3 and 15.1, you are not eligible for compensation, benefits continuation, or future recommendation. Any attempt to dispute this outcome may be subject to arbitration as outlined in your onboarding documents. This matter is considered closed. Attached, a PDF with her name, the signature she barely remembered giving 5 years ago, and the violations outlined in legalese so dry it felt intentionally cruel. She stared at it. For a long time. The cursor hovered over the reply button. Her fingers moved. Stopped. What was she going to say? It wasn't what it looked like. I didn't think anyone would notice. He made me feel important. She hit reply. The blinking cursor waited. So patient. She typed a few letters. Erased them. Typed again. This is not. Deleted that too. She leaned back in her chair, stared at the blank reply box. Then, with one motion, she hit delete. No dramatic send-off. No email war. No retaliation. Just silence. Final. Permanent. She closed the laptop. It made a sound like a sigh. Across town, someone else was reading the same press release. But he wasn't erased. He wasn't revoked. He was just retired. Quietly. Cleanly. Intact. And far from forgotten. Sunday. 6:02 a.m. Her eyes opened before the sun. No alarm. No dreams. Just the blunt awareness of a life in freefall. Rachel stayed in bed longer than she should have. Her limbs heavy. Her head filled with white noise. The kind of static that comes after too much silence. She hadn't left the house in days. No one had called. Her name hadn't trended. There were no articles, no scandals, no outrage. Just erasure. That was the part she hadn't anticipated. Not disgrace, absence. She finally slid out from under the blanket, padded into the kitchen, and opened her laptop with the reflex of a woman who once had purpose. No new messages. No meetings. No schedules. Just one email. From him. No subject. She stared at the screen for a long moment before clicking it. There was no greeting. No Rachel. No sign-off. Just a quote. Power isn't about being toasted. It's about knowing when to stay quiet. Until silence becomes absolute. Her breath hitched. That was it. One line. She slammed the laptop shut so hard it echoed. For a second, she looked around the room like someone might have heard it. But of course, no one had. No one was coming. That line wasn't for discussion. It was punctuation. Across town, Michael stood alone in the garden. The very place where it all began. The string lights had been taken down. The catering tent was gone. Even the wine-stained patch of lawn where she made her toast had been trimmed and reseeded. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, past the stone path where the waiters once shuffled, past the rose bush Rachel used to brag about pruning every spring but never actually touched. The chairs were stacked. The fountain was still. He stopped under the arch where she'd held her glass up high and declared her allegiance. Where she'd crowned Nathan, the man who actually holds the power. Funny. Michael looked around at the quiet garden, clean, empty his. This was never about revenge. Not really. It was about restoration. About watching someone mistake noise for dominance. Watching her bet everything on a man who made bold toasts and big promises, but never once read the clauses in his own contracts. Rachel thought power lived in applause. In the heat of the spotlight. She never understood it lived in the shadows. In clauses. In folders labeled disclosures. He stood there for a moment longer, eyes closed, breathing in the stillness like it was a prize. And this time, when he smiled, there was no one left to mistake it for surrender.